I've never had to make a video like this before, so this is a bit new to me. I'm going to try and talk about this in a conversational and, just general manner. Please do not mistake the way I say my words for a lack of care. I'm going to talk about what's going on and the response I have to it, and then I'm going to talk specifically about why this channel was shut down this past week. Here are the timestamps, but I really strongly encourage you to watch the whole thing to understand what's going on. I do have to put in a quick trigger warning for harassment and violent threats, death threats. And I will put up another warning right before I talk about them in the video itself. If the reason you're listening is because you want to know why I froze the comment section, please go to the second section of the video. About 3 weeks ago, I uploaded a video called The Writing Styles of BTS. In this video, I talked a bit about the writing styles of each member of BTS and a little bit about what I like from each of them. And for 3 weeks, it was just another video on my channel and everything was normal. But this past Saturday, I received a flood of tons of new comments on that video from very, very angered fans who claimed that I had insulted J-Hope in that video. These new comments claimed that I deliberately insulted him or was too stupid to not realize I was insulting him. And this shocked me because I love J-Hope and his music. The main source of this anger seems to be from 1 or 2 sentences that I believe have been misconstrued, but later trickled out to everything I said was a problem, everything I said was an insult. And I'm going to explain everything in depth in just a moment, but this really surprised me because this video was made out of love, not mockery. I made the video because I love writing and I love poetry and I love BTS. And for 3 weeks, the video comments had been relatively quiet and peaceful and just, positive conversation. And then seemingly out of nowhere, there was this massive pile-on within the span of a few hours. It continued to trickle in for the next few days, but the majority of it happened during that first night. These comments took issue with several things I said in the video, but the main one is the misconception that I tried to portray J-Hope as a writer who completely lacks depth and meaning. I believe my words have been misconstrued, so to clear up any further confusion, I want to take a look at what I said in the video, going through the video chronologically. To start, these commenters did not like that I used the phrase performance writing to describe J-Hope, saying that it was insulting to say he had a performance writing style. Performance writing, by its usual definition, is a form of experimental poetry writing driven by narrative and avant-garde poetics. It's commonly applied to slam poetry and spoken word poetry, experimental theater dialogue, and experimental playwriting. This, of course, includes certain styles of lyric writing and musical writing. In all the circles that I see it used, in all the circles that I use it, talking about my favorite plays and lyrics, it's considered to be a difficult style of writing because it requires a full understanding of both sonic and literary devices, and it aims to explore the relationship between art forms, typically literary art and sound art. It's a style of writing that I deeply admire, and I wanted to attribute it to an artist that I deeply admire because I believe he does this very successfully and for his command of these different elements. Unlike more traditional forms of musical writing, performance writing is not shackled to the service of message. It can and does embrace profound messages, as J-Hope's writing usually does, but it can free itself from the societal demand of message to experiment with pure artistic expression. Message acts as a baseline, and the writer steps beyond it for emotional experimentation. Not all musical writers follow this road, or have the talent or the sensibilities to do so, and few who do can accomplish the kind of expression that J-Hope does. It's also inspiring that he accomplishes this while combining multiple languages into the same art form, and I think anyone who sees this as a lesser type of expression is really missing out. I did not realize this was going to be a problem. Most people generally understood what I meant when I would say something like confessional writing or sensory writing. When I would talk about those styles, typically just people got what I meant. I thought everyone knew what I meant when I said performance writing. I can see how people who didn't know what I meant drew the wrong conclusions, but I never meant to be insulting. This was meant as praise because I regard this form of writing really highly. Moving on, one of the smaller issues people had was with the phrases unhinged and bugeyed as figurative descriptions of J-Hope's tone. I think what's happening here is that a description that I view as inherently positive and exciting is one that some people view as inherently negative. Starting with unhinged, this is a word I love. I think it's a word that perfectly describes what I love about J-Hope's stanzas. When you unhinge, you let loose and you stop restraining. To unhinge means to open up, to dislocate from the norm, to step outside the boundaries of traditional and expected. That's who J-Hope is to me, someone who unhinges his boundaries to create art. J-Hope is unhinged from limitations. He unhinges the door on his art and steps outside the box, figuratively. I know some people take unhinged to mean like crazy or deranged. I'm not calling him crazy, I'm calling him creative. I don't always use words according to their exact classical definitions, but instead as words that feel exactly like the quality I admire. For bugeyed is a real colloquialism for staring at something in awe. Urban Dictionary's top definition literally defines it as an idiom that refers to the surprised expression in one's eyes when they've seen something amazing or when someone does something extraordinary. Maybe this isn't like super common slang, but the phrase bug-eyed as it's used in the video doesn't refer to J-Hope's features or his stance as being weird. It refers to what his rap does to people. It makes you stare at something extraordinary. These comments also objected to me saying he comes onto a track like he's from another world. That's my honest opinion of his talent's impact. I don't think there's another rapper like J-Hope in this world. To express this, I reached back to his mixtape Hope World, where he says in his title track, "Say hello to my hope world, this is my world." I'm echoing his own imagery and figurative to show why I love his flow and style. He describes his music as its own world, so when he comes onto a group track, it's like he's coming from Hope World into our world. That was the point of that line. But these commenters told me that I was insulting him, that I was trying to say he doesn't fit with the other members, he doesn't belong in the group, he's out of place. This couldn't be farther from what I meant. I genuinely think if I had said something like, he's an otherworldly rapper, these comments would have had a different reaction. People would have thought that was appropriate praise. These commenters also objected to my early disclaimer that J-Hope co-writes, which is there so people can keep in mind I can't say which lyric belongs to which person. These comments told me that I was trying to insinuate that J-Hope is a lesser writer because he writes with other people. That's simply not true. I mentioned co-writing up front to let people know that this section in particular has examples for which I wouldn't be able to know which line belongs to which person, not an opportunity for me to go, haha, J-Hope can't write alone or something like that. The ability to co-write is a strength, not a flaw. The ability to combine different voices and methods is what makes BTS's music so resonant and powerful. It's a massive group project. In Jin's section, I also bring up that he constantly co-writes with RM and Slow Rabbit, but no one accused me of insulting his process. If I had set out to insult J-Hope's writing process, I wouldn't have gone out of my way to point out how crucial he is to every BTS album, or praise his dedication to writing in multiple languages just a sentence before. I also mentioned this because I wanted to set up a brief and passing joke about the pigeon line in one verse, and of course these comments kind of jumped all over that, and they were saying things like, it's ironic because she doesn't understand that she's the pigeon who jumps at the song hook but doesn't get the point. Guys, it was just a joke. I thought we were all enjoying an inside joke about the pigeon thing. Okay, so let's get into this whole message thing. The accusation is that I insulted J-Hope and said he never has message in his music. However, there are several points in the video itself where I point out the ways that J-Hope uses sound to enhance his meaning, particularly through story. At this point in the video, I'm going through his poetic devices. I say he really does love mutated repetitions, where a line will start or end the same way, but he'll twist the in-betweens to rope the audience into the narrative. Here, I'm talking about how he pulls the audience into the story using the poetry. A lot of people claimed that I specifically chose lines that lacked message or depth in order to force my anti-J-Hope-ness into the video. The lyrics that are on screen read, "My personality is half and half, a public figure's striving life, abstaining from big cravings, always breathless from daydreaming, from daydream." I guess I just disagree with a lot of these people that Daydream and the other songs used lack message. I included this line because I thought it exemplified the kind of narrative poetry and narrative hook that I was talking about. When I listen to Daydream, I'm caught up at first in how catchy the song sounds, but then I'm roped into the sad truth he's conveying in the text, that being a celebrity has kind of driven him in half. My emotions evolve from enjoying the sound of the song to being pulled into the story and its truth. I chose this line because it moves me, and it uses poetry to take me into the experience. The video then switches to talk about the opening of Baseline. My next point of analysis goes, J-Hope's poetry is really catchy, and then this line which people really hated, he doesn't write sound for some illustrious meaning, he's writing it because it sounds good. I think I understand the issue here. During a video essay, it can be difficult to understand when one topic ends and another begins because you can't see the paragraph breaks right in front of you. And I think that because I use present tense when I say he's writing it because it sounds good, that made people think I was saying this about J-Hope's entire body of work, like one big generalization. I mean, the entire video is in present tense, but that's not what I meant at all. I was just celebrating his joy of sound in the opening for baseline. I think the issue with J-Hope's section is the order in which I talk about things and the speed at which I shift topics. My whole thesis on Hosuk is that he's so far beyond style and form that you can't choose one or the other. They're interwoven. He's creating new forms of artistic expression and meaning. I meant to show that in the video by repeatedly shifting between style and form to show how they influence and enhance each other. In contrast with RM, I split the section into okay, here's all his sound devices and here's all his content devices, but with Hosuk I went back and forth. From the very beginning, I was shifting topics. I started a sentence by saying J-Hope's writing is about sound and flow, which would put him in form, and then I end that same sentence talking about content, saying, but his tone and word choice are so singular to him. So you hit this section, and I talk about repetition being used for narrative, and then boom, I talk about repetition being used for sound. These are two separate pieces of analysis about the same poetic device, separated by the songs used to exemplify them. And frankly, I don't really think that having music where you explore art for art's sake is a negative thing. That's one of the things I'm going to get into. I think it's a huge positive. I have an entire video on my channel about art house video making, where the how, the devices, the mechanism is more important than the why, and that's a kind of storytelling that leaves an audience with nothing but pure emotion. I think art for the sake of art is really awesome, and I wanted to highlight just for a moment a time when I thought J-Hope was doing that. I felt these lines from Daydream were narrative-driven, and then I felt these lines from Baseline were sound-driven, where J-Hope is now using that same device to serve as his flow as a rapper. I think an incredibly fair criticism would be, Mira, this section is confusing. It's hard to tell when you stopped talking about one bit of analysis and moved on to another. The video goes on to describe ego. I spend quite a bit of time on one verse, which I selected because it combines the emotion of the narrative with the flow of his rap. I'm describing how the performance brings you from that happy, upbeat, dancing emotion to a resigned sort of feeling, talking about how it sounds like he's sighing in the music. The next point in the video is about his transitions. I say, Hosuk prefers transitions in his writing, and he likes to tweak the syllables in each verse as he leaves one type of performance and moves into the next. The examples I provide from this are from Daydream, Wanna Cry in Peace, I know, Wanna Party Like Crazy, I know, Wanting to Be Flustered in Love, I know, yeah, I know, 'cause me, y'all must have been caught like fish in a net called desire with the thirst of life. From Blue Side, when I spit out my pains in the dark, when the cold air was frozen by sighs, I felt it on the rainbow bridge that I wanted to walk the blue road, I'm singing my blues. And from Trivia, Just Dance, if you ask me about that moment, it was like bright sunshine falling down. If you ask me about that feeling, I can picture it natural with my eyes, one shot. In that atmosphere, we turn on the music, and each door stretching, the tension relieved. If I had hidden the way I feel, I would have regretted that sunset with you. These are narrative moments in his writing where his flow brings you through the changes in the story, the different scenes, his personal epiphanies, and his emotions. I love his transitions because they're narrative driven and his flow backs it up. That's what this whole section is about. That's why I chose these examples. Like the section about roping you into the narrative, I talk about how he uses poetry to bring you from scene to scene in his story. I then move on to talk about ego again, and I include a transition that isn't about narrative, but rather about humor. It's the oh my god, god, god section. This is another example of me moving on to a new piece of analysis while talking about the same device. I say, he plays with the audience, casually remarking that his life must have been regret after regret until his death with this big smile in his voice. Where RM and Suga have dry wit and dark humor, Hosuk is straight fucking funny. People claimed that when I stopped to talk about his humor in his writing, I was watering J-Hope down to just the funny guy in the group, and I was stereotyping him as the goofy band member whose only role is to tell endless jokes. I disagree. I think being able to write successful humor is an incredibly hard skill to master. I talk about how he crafts a lyrical joke, how his writing will include a narrative plant and a narrative payoff, and how these allow him to use humor to create a sense of micro and macro. And if you've seen the video, you'll know that whole conversation surrounding micro and macro is one purely about internalized message. To the people saying that pointing out his humor insults him, I don't think being funny is an insult. I don't think it's a low form of art when a writer takes a second to tell a successful setup and a successful payoff. Smart people write comedy. When I talk about how I think he's funny and great at setting up plans and payoffs, I say it because I admire it. I admire the intelligence that goes into setting up a really good joke and having it rhyme and having it be in rhythm and fit the content of the song. Humor is many writers' number one way of conveying message. I think in times like right now, like Butter, when BTS is having a moment of promotion in the Western market, some fans get really antsy about how the members are respected and represented. People remember all the bad media coverage and they see assholes and bigots spewing garbage like, boy bands are dumb, they're fake, BTS music sucks, I hate Dynamite, their lyricism is bad. And fans get really protective. They don't want to see the members watered down to one trait. But the fact that J-Hope is unfortunately sometimes labeled the funny one in the group doesn't change the fact that he writes really smart humor. And on some level, I understand this protective urge. I understand fearing that an artist you care about may get stereotyped. But there is a difference between bringing up the devices he uses to tell a great joke and labeling him just the funny guy. And if the solution to stereotyping is that we're never allowed to talk about J-Hope's humor ever again, I think that would be a loss. I love his tone and his ability to craft a great joke, so I took a moment to say so. The big MacGuffin in all of this is the sentence, in his solo music, I would say he's somewhat less message-driven and is more interested in creating sounds he wants to listen to. This is the sentence that has made people so angry. And I genuinely understand what the problem is. For those who came here in good faith disagreement or honest confusion, please allow me to explain this part of the essay. The problem, I believe, is in the phrasing of the sentence, not its intention, and that's on me, I should have clarified. If I were to rephrase this sentence, it would go, I would argue that in his solo mixtape Hope World, J-Hope goes out of his way to include verses and lines that are driven by sound, and he takes time to explore art for art's sake, and that this theme is important to the overall artistry of the album and his direction as a rapper. He will take time to include lines where his flow or delivery or expression are the main focus of that line, and I wanted to highlight this because I love it. I love that he loves the medium of music and will have his own little inclusions of sound for sound's sake alongside the rest of his body of work. I think the ability to use language and delivery to create sounds people have never heard before is a crazy cool skill. To point that out alongside all of his other strengths, I don't think that's an insult. I only include one example, just one. I then say, in this case, the message is servicing the sound, not the other way around. Word for word, the phrase I use is in this case, and I even stress the this, meaning in exception to all the other times that his sound services his message. In this one example, I wanted to emphasize a time that I believe his message serviced his sound, and people took that to mean that I said he never has message. I wouldn't argue that his message services his sound in this case if there's no message to begin with. This is the only other part in that segment, that's the entire thing. And a lot of people responded to this by saying that, J-Hope would never stop to consider sound, how dare you imply that? And to say anything about his sound means that he would be automatically sacrificing message. Divorcing a few lines from message in order to look at them artistically does not sink an artist's overall depth. And there were so many comments saying, how dare you associate his music with sound instead of content? How dare you imply that he cares about sound when he's writing his lyrics? He's an artist, he's deep, he would never think about delivery or performance when he's writing. Don't associate his lyrics with delivery, he's not shallow like that. If you actually cared about his music, you'd know he only cares about what the words mean, not about how they sound. He doesn't even think about that, you liar. I think this is just a place where I disagree with people. I do believe J-Hope will occasionally include a line or a verse where he set out to emphasize his flow and delivery, and that he uses Hope World as a sound landscape. He's a rapper, it's part of his art. The problem is in the phrase less message-driven when what I want to say is more sound inclusive. He's a rapper who will step outside the narrative of story and instead pursue art for art's sake. So I thought meaning was implicit. I assumed that we all kind of were using meaning as a baseline, and I wanted to highlight how he'd gone beyond that in the pursuit of a purely emotional and artistic connection with sound. That's why I say he's interested in creating sounds, which I felt was the wonder of this topic. I didn't clarify it because I thought it was implicit and it wasn't. I thought we were all walking into that conversation with the understanding that the layers to his work were part of it, because we all feel seen by J-Hope's lyrics. Hope World is full of stories and epiphanies and personal grievances, and his lyrics, both solo and group, are constantly referencing the theme of being driven in half. One of his constant lyrical motifs is truth, like the honesty of self, and how his sense of self is sometimes in conflict with how the world sees him. And in Hope World, it's like he's setting up a personal world where only his true identity matters. It's what makes these artistic inclusions and these sound devices more powerful and exciting, putting aside all of the people watching him and just carving out a space to express himself. And I really love that expression. And it's why I wanted to highlight it so much, because I think that it's a really honest expression of the themes that are at play in Hope World. That's what I'm trying to get at when it comes to his solo work. He's walking a balancing act between what the world wants him to be and what he wants to do for himself. And a lot of that is through the pure expression of sound and performance writing. This lyrical need to be honest and to try and express himself without feeling influenced. And he's talking about it in Daydream, and he's talking about it in Ego, and he's also talking about it in subtler ways in songs like Trivia that start with, "If I had hidden the way I feel, I would have regretted that sunset with you." And then he ends it with, "I just want to dance." I think all of us, on some level, feel seen by that struggle. It's like he's saying, the rest of the world is out there, and it has its own beliefs, and it has its own opinions, and it has its own desires, and it thinks that I owe it a certain set of something because I've given it to it before, but right now, this is my world, and I'm going to set aside time and space and love to turn my emotions into sound, into music. That was the whole point of this section, and I don't think it was very clear then, so I just wanted to take some time to clarify it now. That's what I loved about it. In retrospect, I definitely think that because the video is overly conversational and because I use less instead of more, people would take this the wrong way. So I'm clarifying it now. My whole final conclusion on his section talks about these two observations, how his narratives discuss friendship and self-respect and self-acceptance, and how he focuses on the spectacle of sound. I never set out to accuse J-Hope of being a meaningless member. The video was conversational and it was casual, but for right now, let's not be. I love J-Hope because he is a writer who understands how to use the landscape of his music to connect to people. He is one of the most important writers in modern music to me because he uses poetry to pull you into his world, and it is such a rewarding experience as an audience member to connect to someone through music. And you know what? Sometimes his poetry is all about narrative and pulling you in and bringing you from one stage of feeling and truth to the next, but sometimes he is art for art's sake. Sometimes, not all the time, not even most of the time, but particularly in segments of Hope World, he uses meaning as a springboard for the art, where the content is actually the background for the overall artistic purpose. This is a quality of expression that I, on this channel, have attributed to David Lynch, one of the founders of art television. Art for art's sake is an incredibly awesome form of artistic expression, and there aren't many writers in K-pop or even in pop right now who are pursuing it with such success and nuance as J-Hope. I fully believe that J-Hope loves music, and he takes time in his music just to love it, to do it because he loves it. That's the heart of my love for J-Hope. He's a writer who can embrace narrative and depth and then turn around and go, art for art's sake is a valid form of expression. Moving on to talk about some of the final comments I saw, a couple people suggested that it was an affront for me to make any commentary about BTS if I'm not a native Korean speaker. BTS has become huge in the English-speaking world, and I don't think it's a mistake to share enthusiasm and excitement and devotion for a group that is deliberately bringing themselves to the world. I may not speak his native language, but I can love J-Hope anyway. I can analyze aspects of his art that have so much profound impact on all of us. If you disagree, then we disagree. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the response I received because of all of this and why this channel was temporarily frozen. For this section, I will put up again the trigger warnings from the beginning, but for those of you who are able to keep watching, this is the last section of the video. I think if people wanted me to just include more conversation about narrative and not focus on J-Hope's flow or delivery or expression, all of this could have been done with a simple, hey, I wanted more conversation about this, could you provide more examples of that? Or, hey, this section was confusing, what did you mean? Instead, this past Saturday, 3 weeks after I had posted this video, I was suddenly flooded with so many aggressive, angry comments. I don't know what the first one said, but the first one that I read said like, "Bitch, why are you lying about J-Hope?" People were calling me like a dumbass bitch and a clout chaser, saying, "How dare you stereotype him? How dare you call him funny? How dare you say you listen to his music? You know, he hates people like you. If J-Hope saw you in real life, he'd spit on you because you're a piece of trash and he would know it." Some of them were getting into fights with my subscribers, replying to comments from weeks ago saying things like, "Oh, you're stupid. You're a moron if you listen to her." I even saw under one of the nice comments, someone replying to the person who'd been nice to me saying, "Oh, look, the disease is spreading." And this kind of shocked me and it overwhelmed me. And, you know, I gotta think that's the intention of hitting me with hundreds of new comments in this small amount of time. I don't really believe that all these people individually came to this conclusion and showed up on my channel coincidentally at the same time. In the middle of all of this, I received this message from one of the users: "Delete this video, J-Hope Auntie, before I find you and kill you." And I didn't really take it that seriously, but then a few hours later, I received a second message from a different user. This one was more detailed. It mentioned the city I live in, and it was like, "You have until the end of the day to take down the video, or I will kill you." I have not been open about either of those details. I don't know if I've mentioned like a feature of my campus or something, but I have never gone out of my way to make this public information ever. So at this point, I froze the comment section. I was like in my bedroom, like avoiding windows, and at some point someone came and knocked on the door and I had a moment's panic. Oh my God, it's happening. And it was my mother. She had come to check on me to make sure that I was okay, and she was like, "Do you want to come stay with me and your dad tonight?" So I went and stayed with my parents, and I did not sleep, and I was replaying this over and over in my head. And at this point, because my channel was frozen, there was a second wave of people coming in to accuse me of running away, and someone came into my inbox and was like, "You're a fucking coward." And I was like, "Dude, I'm hiding with my parents because of you people." I've been at the center of some targeted harassment before, but it's never been so much anger for an interpretation that had to paint everything I said in the worst possible light. So going forward, anger-mongering, personal attacks, written violence, and deliberate moral or social skewing are not tolerated on this channel. This has never been a secret about my channel. If you approached this conversation civilly and you felt silence this week, I apologize. I made the decision to close the forum out of fear for my personal safety. I did remove a handful of people whose behavior was completely inappropriate. I haven't looked at the comment section in a week, so I'm gonna go through it and just talk with people who responded appropriately and sincerely. To those who presented their complaints with insults, mocking or vicious tones, threats of violence, or anger-mongering, this channel is not for you. If you came here because you wanted to insult or fight people just for having positive things to contribute, this channel is not for you. Here's the thing. I think even without a breakdown and clarification, that video is not insidious. I don't think it's an offense punishable by mobbing and death. This channel has always been about my love of music and a genre that I care about and my passion for the people who make it. I love J-Hope and I love his music. At the end of the day, this whole thing just makes me incredibly sad. For the people who care or claim to care deeply about J-Hope's message, which was the center of all of this, please keep in mind that one of his key messages is that anger is evil. This is a message that J-Hope has fought for his entire career. Of all the tactics to choose in expressing your dislike, why would you choose one that he himself condemns? This is just to my subscribers now. For those of you who received angry comments from the people spamming the comment section and trying to pick fights, if you received any undue stress or anxiety, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry if you were cussed at or threatened or told you were stupid. The video was supposed to be like a fun conversation starter and everything just got so out of hand. So if you experienced any stress because of this, I apologize. Some of you did reach out to me after the comment section went down and said some really nice and sweet things. So thank you for that. Thank you for asking after me. You know, it's BTS month. It's a time where every year we celebrate their debut and we celebrate how much they've accomplished and the work they've put into to getting this far. And I had another BTS video planned to kind of cap off the month, but I'm going to put that off for some time. Not indefinitely, but just for some time because I need a bit to just not. That's really all there is to say. but thank you to those of you who reached out. It means a lot. And thank you for listening. I'll probably talk a bit more in the comments, but for now, that's all.